Our hearts and prayers go out to the families and loved ones of Roseburg, just as they did after the horrific, unspeakable tragedy of Newtown and Roanoke and Charleston. And the shorthand of names that has become the new normal, in fact, it's far from the new normal, it's the old outrageous normal. Because Congress has been complicit. Congress, in effect, has enabled, it has aided and abetted these shocking, horrific mass slaughters. And the time for regret and grief is over. The time for action is now. We're here to give voice and face to a new campaign, a national initiative that will say to our nation, rise up, America. Rise up, America, to demand action, to demand a vote, to demand accountability from the men and women who are supposed to be addressing this public health crisis. It is a public health crisis. The epidemic of gun violence is as real and contagious as any other contagious or infectious disease, whether it's flu or tuberculosis or Ebola. America knows how to address a public health crisis with action. We knew how to address the multiplying horrific number of car deaths by requiring seatbelts and airbags and padded dashboards. And yes, rules against drunk driving and punishment for drunk driving. This epidemic must be met with a national campaign to ignite and activate the silent majority that are shocked and outraged by these mass shootings and killings, and say to Congress, you must act. Inaction is inexcusable. Filling those gaps in the present law is a good start. It's one piece of a larger program, and I am introducing a measure that will close one of those gaps that allows guns to be sold after 72 hours by a federally licensed dealer, even if there is no complete background check. Most background checks are completed within seconds, literally. But a substantial number require more than 72 hours. And in fact, over the last 5 years, 15,729 guns have been sold to ineligible purchasers. That is, buyers who, under the present law, are prohibited because they are felons or drug addicts or otherwise dangerous under existing law. One of those 15,729 was Darrell Roof in Charleston. He bought his gun that was used to murder 9 people in a church because his background check was not complete within 72 hours. These loopholes in the law have real life consequences in blood and loss. There is nothing political or partisan about the bloodshed, the lives lost, the loved ones who are grieving now. And that is one gap that must be closed, and I will introduce legislation to close it. Likewise, the gap that permits domestic abusers under temporary court orders to continue to have their guns, even though the present law applies to permanent protective court orders. That gap must be closed, and I've introduced the Lori Jackson Survivors Protection Act because Lori Jackson was gunned down by her estranged husband, who was under a protective order but continued to have his gun, and killed her as a result. We are here today to begin a public campaign that will say to our nation, rise up, America, and demand responsible action from your elected leaders, because they cannot be allowed to continue, in effect, aiding and abetting those killings. And I will never forget the day I went to Newtown, the day of that massacre, when parents learned that their 20 beautiful children and 6th grade educators would not be coming home that night. That truly was one of the worst days in my life. These kinds of measures are common sense, sensible, consistent with the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding Americans to continue to hunt and shoot and use their guns for recreation. But the silence and inaction from Congress must end.